I sometimes get compared to the wolf in sheep's clothing among my audience because I am very actually outspokenly against many of the red pill, not only personalities, but ideologies. What did they get right and what did they get wrong? Because I have my opinions on this as well, but I'd love to hear your perspective.
The red pill pipeline, which ultimately there's no way that you get on that ride and you don't come off radicalized. Like that's the thing. If you choose to take a pill, then you're choosing to commit to someone else's game plan. And that's kind of one big thing that I immediately don't like about any kind of pill. The thing is, do they get things right? Absolutely they do. They are very appealing in their honesty, especially to the disenfranchised and the kind of excommunicated from society types of men that no one else will have or show empathy or compassion to. But the thing that those men don't understand is that every accurate point that these manosphere red pill guys have made has been made so much better by someone else. So it's not that they get everything wrong. It's just that there are places that you can go to hear the right things without all the wrong things too. Not a lot of places, which I think is where you and I come together in I think you said the high five of the internet, where there needs to be more spaces where people are listening to men and caring about men without necessarily filling their head with the stuff that like women shouldn't vote.
Lauren, that was so beautifully put. I hold almost the exact opinions. Not to say that I just like hearing my own opinions, but it is like music to my ears. It really is. I think that the stuff that I hear is like, oh, but they tell guys to work out. They tell guys to try and make money, and they tell some truths about the dating world. And I'm like, yeah, there's everybody, that's not only common advice, but it's advice that's been told 1,000 times in better ways. Like you mentioned, the way that I sort of describe it, and I've been thinking about this recently, is for a lot of men, they feel like they're stuck in this pit of despair, right? Life sucks. And if somebody comes down to you and says like, yeah, your life sucks. You're like, yeah, my life does suck. And they're like, well, here's why it sucks. You're like, okay, yes, tell me more. This is great. And that's how you can sort of be pushed down. Whereas what I try to do is say, go down there. And because if somebody just says like, you're privileged, shut up, then you're going to be like, no, right? But if somebody comes down there and says, yes, life does suck. Here, hold my hand. Let's navigate the life that sucks together. Let's figure out how to do this thing. They're going to be a lot more receptive. And that's ultimately what I try to do for a lot of these boys who feel disenfranchised, because it is a real problem. And I think that just to say on the whole, oh, the patriarchy, you're fine, right? That's a terrible attitude, and it's clearly not working, right? There's so many data points to show how men are struggling, and we cannot ignore it, right? That's ultimately my opinion.
Yeah, and so that's one area that I think I would definitely ask, especially the young men, to examine is, of course, women can be frustrating. Absolutely, as a man. You think that men aren't frustrating to women? Like, of course, we're so frustrating to each other, and you do want a place that you can vent about that. But when you actually like go out into the world and you hear how women are saying that watching red pill content is a direct turnoff, like the fact that this is being said by so many different people, is I would compel you to listen. Just like, women of the world, when you hear men saying, honestly, if my girl watches Drew Afawalo or one of those other hyper, like, radically feminist, like, man-hating, like, I'm gonna make fun of every bald spot, like, overweight, any negative quality a man has type people, I would compel women to ask themselves if maybe that's a valid criticism as well. Maybe that's not the kind of stuff that you should be listening to if you want to have healthy relationships with men.
No, I think that's very well put. And I think that really what it comes down to is that a lot of people have lost the plot. Men and women are on the same team. We've always been on the same team. We're different, right? We play different roles. And I want to make it very clear that when I say roles, that women can fill a more traditionally masculine role in a relationship and men can fill a traditionally feminine role. Like that's completely fine. That's not something, I think that the masculinity, right, when you think of it as what it is, in my mind, it's positive, right? There is no toxic masculinity is there are traits that are toxic that can be prescribed to masculine things. But masculinity should be something that's not only positive, but it's necessary, right? We need it. And
Yes.
same thing with femininity. And that doesn't necessarily mean that as a man, you have to be masculine. But again, we are on the same team. My favorite quote from one of my favorite quotes from Scott Galloway, I mentioned him a lot, is that 1 + 1 = 3 when it comes to a relationship, right? You get more out of doing this thing together than you do the sum of its parts individually. Empathy among men and what I would call emotional stability. And my emotional stability, if I were to describe it, it is not, right, never crying. It is not feeling depression, anxiety, or any kind of emotions. What emotional stability is knowing your emotions, knowing how to feel them, knowing how to process them, and knowing when you don't necessarily process them in the ways you don't, or the ways you want to, why you don't, right? And I think that a lot of men do not do that. And they think that they should be this emotionless husk, when in reality, it should be, if I'm going to get angry, right, and I know that doing something really small you're going to do is going to piss me off, and then I need to be able to communicate to you that. Otherwise, we're going to become enemies. It's going to be like we're going to, trying to navigate each other's random explosions.
Exactly. And this is another thing, a very simple thing that could be fixed with just more fathers in the home having conversations with their sons saying, hey, you feel angry? Say out loud, I feel angry. That simple connection between a father and a son could cause just decades, a lifelong grown adult who can communicate and have emotional intelligence. But there's really not that many expressions of that. Because again, we have the young men of the world who are looking up to these like alpha males who they're doing the same thing that a lot of the problematic feminists are doing, where they're showing up with problems and not solutions. So they're showing up and saying, women laugh at us when they cry. Okay, that's true. So how do we cry in front of women? There's not enough people, like maybe channels like ours that are willing to have those heavy conversations and say like, okay, this is how you actually communicate your feelings. This is how you open up the door there. And instead It's just kind of pushing us back into the same cycles, because the truth of the matter can't be, okay, well then men just have to suck it up. Together as a culture, men and women together, we have to help create a culture that makes it safer for men to do these things. And we can't just point our finger and say patriarchy. That could be true, but men are really sick of us saying, but the patriarchy, instead of actually contributing to fixing it.